Hello, welcome back to the Narconon and Scientology Chronicles. I'm Lucas Catton. And I want to talk about something that came up yesterday in the first day of the pretrial hearing for the charges against Danny Masterson, which include rape. And there are three victims that are scheduled to appear from my understanding. One of them started testimony yesterday and is going to conclude cross-examination today, according to excellent reporting from Tony Ortega, who's on the scene in person, as well as there's an AP article, Associated Press, that went out, and tons of organizations have picked up that as well. So there's quite a bit of coverage and now quite a bit of interest. And of course, the main point is whether or not the victims can achieve justice. And if he's found guilty, what does that mean? And I won't go into all those details because I don't know. I'm not an attorney, but there's lots of reporting. Go to Tony Ortega's site and check out some of the stuff from Leah Remini and Mike Rinder where they've talked about this. But the point that I want to bring up today is whether or not the Church of Scientology and its members who were participating in this, if Danny Masterson is found guilty, can they be and will they be charged with obstruction of justice? And here's why. I wanted to talk about one thing about an accessory after the fact. And that is, an accessory after the fact is someone who assists in either someone who has committed a crime after the person has committed the crime, or with knowledge that the person committed the crime, and with the intent to help the person avoid arrest or punishment. An accessory after the fact may be held liable for, among other things, obstruction of justice. That's according to the Cornell Law School. And the reason why I bring this up is because as entered into evidence yesterday, already in the first day of the pretrial hearing, that they talked about the fact that the first victim went to the Church of Scientology, reported it, and not only in writing, but also in person to multiple members, and they convinced her not to go to the police. She then did eventually, several months later, go and file charges or report it to the police, and there's a lot more on that. So she didn't, but they put a lot of pressure on her not to go and helped her cover it up. And one of the ways that they helped get it covered up is by submitting a boatload of affidavits, apparently, from people who were claiming that the witness, Jane Doe number one, as she's called, was lying, or that it never could have happened, or that she was making things up, or like all these kind of things. And Scientology has a history of doing this, not only through its president's office and Office of Special Affairs, but through their attorneys, through their private investigators, through this whole slew of people who are trying to cover up crimes and known criminal activity by members and the organization itself as a whole. And specific people have been named in this. I think one of them was Julian Schwartz, for example, who had met with Jane Doe number one. But also the international justice chief for the Church of Scientology. She actually wrote to him and asked for permission to report it. So it was very much embroiled with the church and Scientology doctrine as a whole, that they were committed to covering up. And some of the history of this, if you recall back to, there was a story that CNN did, that Anderson Cooper did, called A History of Violence. And it was about David Miscavige and reported eyewitness abuses from things that he had done, where he had attacked people, and there was lots of people on there. A bunch of high-profile defectors from Scientology back at the time who were locked up in the hold and other things. And what they did, the church and their attorneys hauled out a whole series of people, including the former spouses of many of these people, and issued affidavits, and even went on camera saying that they were lying, that they were completely false allegations, and they tried to make it go away. Now, charges weren't filed, and here's a big difference here, because submitting an affidavit, not only, yes, it is perjury, but if that person never gets called to the witness stand, if there's not a criminal case involved, then a lot of times people can get away with it, because you can say what you can say and they may not be able to prove it. But in this case, this is different. They not only have the written record of these things that are occurring, plus the testimony of people, but if they call some of these witnesses who issued affidavits, or who tried to get the LAPD to not file charges against Masterson back in 2003, 2004, et cetera, and then over the years since then, and multiple then victims have come forward, minimally 3 just in this trial alone, that all the people who knowingly lied are technically guilty of obstruction of justice. And that needs to be looked at, in my opinion, after the outcome of this trial. If Masterson is indeed found guilty, the individuals and probably the organization as a whole, if they can charge the organization with obstruction, I know many times you have to charge individual people, so I'm not sure about the legality of that and how that goes. But it would be interesting to have an attorney and an expert in this area to be able to weigh in and say, yes, these are obstruction charges. They should be filed. These people are guilty of those things, and I think it's just one more instance of a long pattern, long history of trying to cover up crimes knowingly that have been committed by individual members of the Church of Scientology, either as parishioners or as staff members, or as Sea Org members, the highest echelon of staff members, or crimes committed by the organization as a whole, because it's part of their policy to do so. So that's my that's my 2 cents on that. I really wanted to get in and take a look at that. I'm going to dig a little deeper to see what can come up, and again, if you know someone who is an attorney and has more information about whether or not this can result in obstruction charges, I'd love to find out, and I'd love to hear back from you. So we'll continue waiting to see what happens in today's preliminary hearing, or the continuation of it in today's testimony. And I think it's scheduled for a minimum of 4 days. Could go beyond that. We'll see. And lots of things can happen. But I do know that it has been noted that Tom Mazzaro, Danny Masterson's lead defense attorney, has really fought hard to keep Scientology out of the equation, likely at the request of and the demand of David Miscavige and Church of Scientology Celebrity Center, and their attorneys, trying to claim they had nothing to do with it, when in fact they were absolutely intimately involved in trying to cover this up. So take a look at Tony Ortega's site, tonyortega.org, for ongoing coverage of this, and certainly in news outlets everywhere. And I hope that that justice prevails. Take care.